Hello, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're joining from today. Thank you for joining our live stream here today to talk about all things related to digital transformation. The special edition today is going to be focused on project collaboration within digital transformations and some best practices and tips to collaborate better as a team, to upskill better as a team, and to onboard better as a team. So those are some of the things we'll cover here today. I'm going to introduce our guest here in just a moment, but before I do that, a couple logistical things. First of all, we'd love to get audience questions. So any questions that you all might have as we're going through this conversation, I'd love to hear from you. So drop those in the chat if you don't mind. And we'd love to get to your questions in addition to the ones I have for our guest here today. Secondly, this interview will become part of our weekly Transformation Ground Control podcast. So by being here today, you're part of our live production of the show, and really appreciate you being here and being part of that live production. You can find past episodes of that podcast by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. So once we get through this episode here today, we'll edit it, we'll add some additional content, and we'll make it part of a formal podcast episode that is released here in a couple of weeks on Transformation Ground Control. And again, that's transformationgroundcontrol.com. And then lastly, I know I asked the audience here to drop any questions you have in the chat, but while we're waiting for you to drop questions in the chat, if you don't mind, I'd also love to hear from each of you what city and country you're joining from today. So just please drop in the chat what city and country you're joining from today. We tend to draw in a global audience, so it's always fun to see where everyone's joining from today. I myself, for example, am joining from Denver, Colorado in the U.S., and I'll let our guest here, when she introduces herself, she'll tell us where she's at, but I'd love to hear from you, the audience, where you're joining from today. So please drop that in the chat. And again, today's topic is project collaboration, best practices and tips for digital transformations. And joining me to have this conversation is Rachel Lyubovitzky, the CEO of Setuply. Rachel, thanks for being here today.
Hey, Eric. It's great to be here. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever the visitors are.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to see where the audience is joining from today. Where are you joining from today, by the way, Rachel?
I'm actually joining today from Valletta, Malta, but Setuply is based out of Portsmouth, New Hampshire.
Okay. Although it sounds like Malta, I mean, it's nothing against New Hampshire, but Malta sounds more appealing right now. But no offense to those that might be joining from New Hampshire, of course. But there's something about Malta. I've never been, but sounds like a great place. So just to get started here today, then tell us a little bit about yourself as well as Setuply and what Setuply does.
So I'll start with Setuply. Setuply is a client onboarding and lifecycle management platform designed for solution providers to help optimize revenue recognition. We'll probably talk a little bit about some of the ways that we do this. I am the CEO of the company. As I mentioned, we're based in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and covering North America and other areas of the world.
Great. And how long have you been in your role there at Setuply? How long have you been doing this?
Oh, I'm one of the founders. So since the very beginning, we were founded in 2022. So about 2 years ago, we just recently, last month, celebrated our birthday.
Oh, very cool! Congratulations. Most businesses do not make it to 2 years, so you are doing better than most already.
2 years.
2 years, and you've had a lot of good growth, and you're addressing a really interesting niche or a need in the market, which we'll get to here in a second. Also want to turn to the audience. Melissa is joining us from New Hampshire. So Melissa, thanks for joining. She's one of the people I may have offended with my comment about Malta being better or more appealing than New Hampshire. So hopefully she's not too offended by that. Again, I'd love to hear from the rest of the audience where you're joining from today. So I guess just as we get started here, Rachel, what are some of when we think about digital transformation, like in this podcast and in a lot of the YouTube videos I put out, we talk a lot about more of the functional things that need to happen around like general project management and change management and technical stuff. But this is sort of a different angle we're talking about here today. We're talking about project collaboration and how teams collaborate in a digital transformation or an ERP implementation. So when we think about that, though, what are some of the things we need to think about as far as the major components of project collaboration? Like, what are some of the things we should be thinking about, or some of the things you've seen that are important to your clients and being successful in their projects?
So maybe taking a little bit of a step back, So companies decide for business reasons to be competitive that they need to enhance their operating stack. They need to enhance their ERP product, their HR product, and so on to make them more competitive, to make them more efficient. A lot of times it's a logical business decision that yes, we all need to focus on bringing more AI into our lives and so on. So while it is a logical decision, sometimes there's a mind leap that needs to be taken that, hey, what will it mean to our team? What will it mean to the different stakeholders inside the team of a client that decides to go through the digital transformation? How will their work day change? Will they work themselves out of a job if the product or service that the company is using is so much more efficient? So a lot of these concerns, what if they will not be able to learn it? What if it's too difficult? So there's a massive mind shift that needs to happen on the side of a client, right? And a solution provider that is helping them enter that new realm, on board on the new technology, has to be aware of that. Has to be aware that it's not that they just bought the product, is that sometimes they're still making that mental shift towards different technology. So incorporating that into the onboarding process is an absolutely necessary thing to do. Sometimes client is onboarded and up and running, and they realize what they've done months later, years later, that, oh, that's what it means. The impact could not necessarily be immediate. It could take a long time. So being with your client as they're going through that change is a key component outside of any technologies. Uh,
Mm,
and ultimately, technology helps kind of wrap yourself around it and make sure you're on top of clients' needs. You're aware of what they're doing. You're touching every team member that's affected, and your own team is in touch with what's being done as you're supporting that client from sales to onboarding to ultimately client success, client support. That you are aware of that transformation and you're supporting them in different ways.
right. So it's really, what we're talking about here is not just an internal project team collaborating better, and it's not just a consulting partner that you might be working with collaborating better. It's a way to kind of bring the two parties together to collaborate those outside consultants with the internal resources. Is that sort of how you
Correct.
would define it?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So why is it, obviously you saw a need in the market, which is why you guys started this company and you created this tool set to help address that need. But why is it before you started this company and even now as you're getting more and more customers in your market, why is it that so many companies don't recognize the need right away, for what you're talking about? You mentioned that they sometimes realize later how important it would have been to have done this right. Why is it they don't recognize it earlier, oftentimes earlier in the cycle?
Um, Many reasons for that. Not the least of them being the view that onboarding is a kind of transitional process, uh, just like sales, by the way. Hey, you sold and they're out of your sales cycle. There's someone else in there. Same for onboarding. They're onboarded. There's now someone else. But if you're doing it at scale, if you're doing many onboardings at the same time, ultimately the process is repeatable, just like sales is. And figuring out ways to help navigate through that process in the most efficient way, fulfilling way, because the relationship with the customer doesn't always start after they sign the dotted line. It signs when they really realize the value of what they
Mm,
bought. So onboarding team is really the first one that helps customer realize that, start realizing that. So, but because that experience is viewed as transitional, that's the kind of a lost opportunity to think about it a little bit more strategically to say, hey, they're starting, it's like somebody, a baby learning to walk. Look at this. Look at how amazing this new world is for you. We're so happy to be with you during that point of your transition, and let us take you further on that journey. So this kind of realization, the transitory nature of it, the other element that companies kind of this outside solution providers sort of cringe a little bit is it is expensive. Onboarding is not for some of the outsourced organizations. It could take 6 months. It could take a year and a half. And as you're helping client make that transition, like, hey, we've always done it this way. I'm not sure we can do this that way. Can we try it for a month? It could create incredible delays. And so traditionally, that organization was viewed as a cost driver rather than somebody that opens up the world to your clients. So being the cost driver, a lot of solution provider, service provider organizations are unwilling to kind of look at it as something that could be something other than just driving up costs. Uh,
Mm,
so looking at them as a strategic partner that can uncover new opportunities. Oh yes, I'm being onboarded, but oh, what about this module? I see that on my screen. What's going on? Oh, let us tell you about it. Let us educate you. Oh wow, this is amazing. So now you have onboarding team that's becoming almost like an advocate and a sales agent supporting the customer as they're learning more about this new solution.
yeah. Yeah. So it's more than just onboarding, from getting a team up and running. It's also just educating and making sure they're in sync with where the project is headed and also seeing opportunities to take the project in different directions as well.
Totally. And to what sort of drove us here, my partners and I are serial entrepreneurs. So this is actually our fourth venture. We find difficult challenges in the world of technology and set about to solve them. So the last venture was in the world of insurance and benefits. And one of the hardest things about that business was client onboarding.
Mm,
Uh, it's extremely important in the world of insurance, especially in the US, to get it right the first time because you don't want to see people showing up at the hospital or their doctor without having coverage. So making sure you're doing it right, you're in touch with every single stakeholder, and everybody gets to the finish line. We looked at it kind of defensively. What can we do to deliver a really good service? And after we exited and were looking around for a good challenge to solve, uh, we started asking this question and realized that vast majority of service providers, solution providers out there are not using tools that are designed for that purpose. They're using, bits and pieces of different single point solutions. Hey, I'll use SharePoint to store client data. I'm going to use some specialized, maybe just project management software to manage the project. I'm going to use Google Forms to have clients complete forms. I'm going to use survey software to collect information in the course of onboarding. And so if you think about the client experience, it's a very fragmented. They are going through a lot at the moment, right? They're going through a major change, and now they have to put their document into SharePoint one place. Let me see what's on my plate somewhere else. So it becomes very frustrating for clients who are going
mm.
through this. And also for the teams that are supporting them that have to constantly check in on, did they upload the document? Did they complete their task? And what ends up happening with many of these organizations, despite their best effort, is that a, a lot, I would say, what we're seeing is in some extreme cases, 90% of the time is spent chasing down, tying the loose ends between the different single point solutions, staying on top of clients. Hey, have you uploaded the file? Okay, not yet. I'll check in tomorrow. Imagine doing that for the service team instead of helping your customer experience new things. It's a completely different ball game.
Yeah, and it gets rid of all the emails back and forth and the other types of messages that may or may not get read. It gives you sort of a central place to collaborate, and I think that is something that's missing oftentimes is having that central source of truth for the
Truth.
project. Yeah. So when you think about onboarding, then onboarding a team, what are some of the keys to successful onboarding for a project team?
Uh, Definitely spend a lot of time upfront aligning on the expectations. So, aside from anything technology related, really be on the same page with the client, what they hope to get out of it, what is the definition of success. A lot of times, folks who signed the dotted lines are not the ones who are running the show. They're not the ones who are using the product and getting the work done. So, that's the point when you usually get to meet them and get their perspective. Take the time to get their perspective. Also, early on, um, start thinking about what the rollout is going to look like. In some settings, it's 6 months later. In some settings, it's a year and a half later. So start thinking about how would the team respond. Who are going to be your early adopters who will start, using the product and getting the rest of the team excited. So think about that. Define the rules of engagement. So let's say we're going to have a weekly call. and you're going to have homework, and this is how you're going to know what's on your plate, because they're learning to walk, if you will, and you have to practice every now and then to get somewhere. So uh, how you will communicate, who will be the ultimate person accountable or team accountable for the progress. So getting all of these things out and spending a lot of time up front defining, because sometimes weekly call is not possible, sometimes it's biweekly, making sure you're totally aligned on how they view success and how they want to work with you towards it is critical. And then being very, very consistent in following that process with them and supporting them and encouraging them at every step of the way is, hey, we've got this going. Let's again see everybody, encouraging and supporting them throughout the process. And then when you get to the finish line, when you're looking at the rollout, uh, making sure you're collecting the feedback consistently. How
Mm.
was it? How could it be done better? One of the key things is it's having this consistent process that's important, but as important is iterating on that process to make sure that you're continuing to be in touch with your customer and internally, and early on, perhaps in the process, having your sales team involved so there's continuity for the customer. Later on, bringing in client success into the picture so they get to know the client. It's not like, Joe
Yeah.
over here will take care of you. Making sure that all the way you're supporting them through that transition. And that's what ends up, what's going to end up with a happy customer and the team that's feeling very happy about what they've gone through with that customer.
Yeah. So I think it's sort of implied, or you've mentioned it sort of in passing here, but I'll ask it more directly anyway. And that is, what happens when we don't do the things that you're talking about here? Like if we don't have that proper onboarding process, or we don't have that way of effectively collaborating as a project team, what does that do to a project? And what's sort of the pain that organizations feel when they don't do the stuff that you're talking about?
Oh, that's what turns it into a cost driver. That's what gives it the bad reputation. Uh, some of the things, well, obviously, the obvious thing is the scope creep.
Mm,
If there's no particular, if and sometimes in companies that don't have a scale, service offering yet, a lot of times when we ask the question, so what's your process? We totally let our clients drive it. Well, they don't know how to drive yet. They're You do this day in and day out. They are only going through that transformation, buying the new product, adopting your product just now. They will know anything about it. It's like coming to a French restaurant and saying, "Hey, the kitchen is over there. Knock yourself out." Uh, so,
right.
so you can be sure you might not be happy with your dinner, if you do that. So, but going back to this, it's a scope creep. Client is not sure. They're just wiggling their way through there. They don't know what they don't know. They don't know what to ask, and so, uh, hey, let's try this. Of course, I will do that for you, client. Let's try this, and then you discover 2 weeks later that's not what they wanted. Uh, so you absolutely need to have a process and you need to manage it. It's also from the perspective of a company that's implementing, could be incredibly frustrating, where you don't feel like you're making progress. We're still thinking about, we don't know about that. Uh, and meanwhile, sales team happily shoots over new cases or over the finish line for you to implement. And so it could become extremely frustrating and overwhelming for the onboarding team to deal with increasing workload, never seeing the finish line, and clients getting frustrated. So we've been doing it for 6 months. I don't know, where are we? Are we there yet? That's a typical question. Are we there yet? I have no idea what stage we're at. And those are some of the reasons to put in a systematic process in place for handling this. Uh, Set very clear expectations up front and support your clients. And one of the key places where I'll plug in technology a little bit here, it's staying on top of, are we there yet? So providing transparency to the client and to the team, whose court the ball is in, when is the finish line, how many tasks, things need to be completed before you get there, and making sure that technology, rather than this poor overworked onboarding team, stays on top of kind of getting those updates and nudging client along and supporting, being your sidekick and moving them through the onboarding uh, journey.
Right. Right. That makes total sense. So with this tool that you guys offer the market, are you selling primarily to the technology service providers or the consultants? Or are you selling to the end customers? Or are you selling to both?
So we're selling to technology companies.
Okay.
So, for example, ERP technology, HCM, InsurTech, and others. We are also selling into the outsourced consulting organizations or service organizations that work alongside both these technology companies to implement and support customers. So,
Got it.
two flavors, ultimately solution providers, whether they are technology companies or service companies.
Right. Okay. Great. I want to turn to the audience real quickly too, and just recognize a couple people that have chimed in on where they're joining from today. Madhu Joshi from Laurel, Maryland, MD. I'm not sure if that means Maryland or if that's a country that I'm not aware of, but thank you for being here today. Either way, Madhu. And then Dr. Krunoslav Rees from Croatia, Europe. So thank you for being here today, Doctor, especially late in the day on a Friday. I appreciate you being here today. Um, so I wanted to get into a couple follow-up questions. So given that, most of the organizations that are buying your software and that are really tasked with thinking through how to onboard a project team and how to collaborate better with a project team, since those are oftentimes the technology providers that end customers turn to be able to address those sorts of needs. What do you think? If we back up for a second and look at this from the perspective of ERP service organizations, what is it that stands in the way for success for ERP service organizations?
I think all of these challenges are not unique to just general world of solution providers. They're very specific and impactful to ERP organizations that deal with extended onboarding life cycles, client data. Typically, ERP service organizations are dealing with migrating clients' historical data from prior ERP system or in-house solution onto the new technologies. So managing a lot of the back and forth as you're collecting that and shifting it into the new software platform. The same challenge of these things take so long. A lot of times, it's staying on top of what's the next step. Are we there yet? Is client still with you? Because a lot of times, and I didn't mention it, but uh, that migration happens for clients' life continues as you're onboarding them for 6 months, a year and a half. So they have their objectives to meet, their business to run. And so onboarding a lot of times, not to say is an afterthought, but it's a parallel path that a portion of the team is going through while also doing their job. So
Mhm.
having sensitivity with that and giving them a way to empowering them synchronously, asynchronously to do their part of the journey. I've completed these 15 forms. I've uploaded these documents. You wanted me to make a decision A or B in this path that we're gonna. I'll do that on Sunday. We don't need to schedule a meeting. So giving them the tools necessary to provide those inputs and stay engaged with you. Also on the client side, on the solution provider side that's doing the implementation, a lot of times it's a different domain experts and stakeholders that are handling it, sometimes even development team, making sure they're all in the loop. They know when it's their turn. They know in case they're going to be held back in an event there's more deals coming their way. So everybody is in the loop on each other's workload, expected go live times, any expected vacations. So technology helps to take those kind of a little frustrating logistical things out of the way, saying, "Hey, I'm going to be on vacation. Can we schedule a meeting? I'm going to be on vacation that week." Imagine that. Imagine if you're dealing with a decently sized team, trying to schedule a regular connect with so many stakeholders. So those are some of the things. If you start to tie in pieces of technology and it's project management that goes into it, it's data staging and management, especially in the world of ERP, which is very data heavy. It's professional services automation, so keeping track of who's working on what, understanding your onboarding team's workload, making sure you recognize when people are maybe struggling or people are, doing really awesome, and you need to recognize that these teams tend to be very overworked, and also client engagement piece, making sure you are in touch with them. Even if you can't physically do that, technology supports you in that.
Right, right. Yeah, that makes total sense. So when we look at the things that stand in the way of success for ERP service organizations, what can be done to help address those challenges?
I think it starts with taking a good look inside and understanding where is the time being spent, how is the team functioning, is the time being how much time is being spent collecting data from clients, hunting them down, how much time is spent engaging meaningfully with them. If that second one is little, that team is not used efficiently. So it's time to start thinking about your processes. Who is driving the show? Who is deciding when is the next connect? When is the next this phase going to start? So taking a look at your process and starting to understand A, whether you have a process, B, now that you have a process, what are the bottlenecks? What gets in the way of getting to the finish line in a predictable manner? uh, and then figuring out which technologies you need to get this out of the way. Because worst case scenario and Excel is I bet you have millions of people in front of their computers. Statistics of who has Excel window up are extremely high. It's a valuable tool, but I think this tool is a little bit maybe too used too often as a crutch in this setting, and it's not sufficient because it doesn't give you the right client engagement, doesn't give you the PSA, and of course not the data piece. So figuring out what your stack is that gets you to the finish line, is that stack sufficient to
Right.
meet your objectives and as a solution provider?
Yeah. Yeah. Makes total sense, and I can see why that would be so important. And it's also interesting to see how the tool you guys offer is a way to address those challenges. Um, why is it important to consolidate your operating toolkit, especially if you're a technology provider?
A lot of times, your time is spent managing the administrative overhead in keeping everything in sync. That's reason number one. Making sure you know when file is uploaded, you know that clients are connecting for a meeting. So it's management overhead. It's the client experience. So if client has to log in five different places to go through the project, it's probably not a good thing. It doesn't help. Uh, Security element. You have to maintain multiple separate secure logins, manage who has access to what. It doesn't sound like a big deal, but if you have to introduce a new employee on your side as a solution provider or a client, making sure the access is properly allocated, it becomes a project. The clients are not there for that purpose. So anything you can do to centralize and consolidate that experience, provide that central point of entry, the single point of truth, if you will, right? Uh, to make sure everybody is on the same page at the same time. They know exactly what's going on. When somebody uploads a document, everybody is aware so that onboarding rep can pick it up and start running with it, almost like a little bit like an Olympic relay. You upload, you immediately get notification. Onboarding rep starts working with the file, completes the file, uploads it, gives it to the next person over who does whatever they do. Get back to the client. We're all set. Let's move on to the next point. That's what kind of having centralized system, centralized process allows you to do, as opposed to checking in. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Oh, good. 2 weeks later. So ultimately, you're looking at like all of us, getting stuff done faster, better, with less effort.
Right, right. Yeah, I can see. I mean, that's obviously what we're all striving for when we're managing these sorts of projects is how can we be more efficient? How can we make more progress? And how can we ensure we don't miss any of the key stakeholders and that sort of thing? So I can see how that would be super helpful from a project collaboration perspective. How does Setuply foster some of this cross-functional connectivity and collaboration?
So our technology is natively built to contain all of these pieces into one. So we have Setuply has project management, professional services automation, so PSA component, data staging, client engagement. We also have case management built in into one platform. They're feeding off the same data. And so as the project moves forward, you can see data being uploaded, you can see team members allocated to work with it, you can see clients' input inputs. It's all connected into one. So that's what allows uh, that centralized experience, holistic view into the project for every single stakeholder. But taking it a little bit further, what we've done with our integrations is help close the loop between the different operating teams that interact with onboarding department. So through our integrations, for example, with sales CRMs, the minute the deal is sold, we can have the deal automatically flow into the onboarding team so nothing is lost in the process. If you ask the client, it's remember those good old days when you go to the doctor's office and you have to fill out that piece of paper and say, yes, my date of birth, yes, all this. It's so frustrating to have to do this over and over and over again. And if that client spent their time providing all that information to the sales organization, to have somebody else in the same vendor team, right, ask the same questions, that starts off the relationship off the wrong on the wrong foot immediately. So if you can eliminate that piece and making sure that, yep, we know exactly who you are, you're still using that product, yes, perfect, we're on the same page, we're moving forward. So you already start that relationship on the next level, not on the ground level. So it's so starting with the the project management life cycle, um, project management, PSA, client engagement, data staging as one platform, and also tying in their other pieces ultimately ties in not just your onboarding team, it ties them to your sales organization, it ties them to your client success. So it gives a holistic experience to them. They're all connected, but also to the client. They feel like they're going through the same group of people, same values, same experiences at every stage of their life cycle as a customer.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. That's I can see how that would be super helpful and super important. And it is a missing link in a lot of these projects for sure. So when what about when we think about um, coming back to why you built this product? You said you and your co-founders are entrepreneurial or serial entrepreneurs. You've started multiple companies. How did you come across this need in the market, or this particular need or problem you're trying to solve in the market?
So we found it to be one of the hardest things in the prior venture, which was in the insurance technology space, that there's a lot of moving pieces and you have to get it just right. And when we were out there looking for the next best thing to build and next big challenge to solve, we started to ask this question of various solution providers out there. So how do you solve it? How do you deal? How do you onboard your customers? And what we discovered that 90% of the time, we probably had, me personally, probably at least 300, 400 different conversations with solution providers. 90% of the time, uh, the answer is, yeah, I use two or three products, but I mostly use Excel. I don't mostly use some kind of spreadsheet to keep track of. On one tab, I have this client. On the second tab, I have my team. On the third tab, I have something else. And it's an awful way. And imagine thinking of sharing that Excel spreadsheet with your customers, how they would feel. They just bought this incredible technology product, and as you know, that uh, ERP platforms, HCM, insurance technology platforms had been maturing, had been adding AI, had been getting more modern, but the companies that are supporting them haven't always kind of stayed on top of the best ways they could do their job. They're working with incredibly powerful platforms, but it's kind of a shoemaker's dilemma. Uh, your own stack is very, very bare. And so that's what led us to sort of start engaging in these conversations and asking questions. So what's in it? What can be done? Well, it's this disconnection. How can we bring it together? It's client engagement. It's a major piece. They got their job to do, right? So how do you stay on top of them without having your team personally call every single day to ask, are we there yet? So what can technology do? And so as you start to fill in those gaps and put together a cohesive solution that touches onboarding from these multiple perspectives and multiple stakeholders, that's what ultimately led to Setaply.
Right. That's very interesting. Yeah, it's such a common problem in the market that you're solving. It's kind of surprising that there haven't been more attempts to solve that problem sooner in the industry. Um,
I think we're at the perfect point where customers' digital adoption rates are continuing to speed up. More and more of them are realizing that, hey, I'm going to be behind the eight ball if I don't do this sooner. So there's a higher inflow of customers coming in. They also are used to having faster gratification, so they want to get to the finish line sooner. So that's one dimension. You have increased load. On the other hand, you also have a difficult time with knowledge workers that support these service organizations. They're hard to come by. It's a difficult job to do this, and so there's a shortage of skilled knowledge workers to support client onboarding. That's what ultimately is sort of this combination of different factors that is starting to drive looking into specialized solutions. Where if you imagine Salesforce 20 years ago, right? Uh, Nobody would think about that you need specialized software to sell. You just pick up the phone and get stuff done, right? We're in that place where you need this in order to make these digital adoption, digital transformation experiences go faster and be more successful.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And you're right. I mean, the digital adoption rates are increasing and speeding up. And, um, the technologies that organizations are deploying from an enterprise technology space, those are getting more and more robust, more complex. And so the implementation and the back end software you use to manage an implementation hasn't really kept up with that pace of change. So it's good to see you guys are doing that. Um, we want to say hello to a couple of guests that are joining us here today. Kristen's joining from Philadelphia. Thank you for being here today, Kristen. And we have Katie joining from Cape Cod. So, and she said she loves hearing about this important topic. So, thank you for being here today, Kate. So, I guess just to we think about project teams, collaboration, onboarding, upskilling, some of the themes we're talking about here today. What are some of the sort of the closing takeaway advice you'd leave project teams with? What are some of the things they should be thinking about as it relates to how to set up a project team, how to onboard them, how to upskill them, how to help ensure the project teams collaborate better? What are some sort of takeaways or first steps organizations can take to sort of set up that foundation?
I think having the awareness and understanding how important onboarding is in the life cycle of your customer, ultimately, how much that onboarding team affects the success of that relationship. Once you realize that and make sure that the onboarding team realizes their importance, you can start thinking about and asking questions. What can we do to change that experience, to improve that experience for the customers and for that group? How can you be more efficient, effective in catering to your customers? One fascinating thing about onboarding teams is if you kind of do disc profiling and understand their personalities, they love to solve puzzles. A lot of the folks who work for the onboarding teams, they like to build things. They like to solve puzzles. They love to do what they do. They love to introduce customers into that realm of what's new. So figuring out what to take off their plate so they could have more meaningful conversations with customers. That's what ultimately companies should be thinking about. Instead of, hey, I need this file, please upload it, there's a piece of data missing. Instead of that is, so what do you hope to accomplish with this? Let's see how we can help you. So they could be more consultative
Mm,
as opposed to kind of transactional, what they have always been.
right. Yeah. Like you said earlier, it gives you that single source of truth on a project too. So, having visibility into into the project and being able to see, the status of the project in any given time. I also feel like, one thing we haven't talked about that I'd be curious to get your feedback on is I feel like as you describe this whole process of collaboration, upskilling, onboarding, all the stuff we've talked about here today, I feel like the tool that you guys provide and the themes we're talking about here today, it also has like an intangible effect, I would think, on how clients can maintain some level of control over the project. Because I think a lot of times what happens is that the technology service provider comes in and they have all this stuff going on behind the curtain. There's stuff that only they know how to do because they know the technology, they know how to configure it, they know how to build it, all that stuff. But then the client doesn't have visibility or transparency into what the client or what the service provider is doing. And there's sort of this learned helplessness that comes along with that. And I feel like this tool sort of brings things out to the surface to where now the client understands better what's going on. The client has better visibility and better line of sight into what's happening with their service provider. Is that something you see as well, or sort of a maybe an unintended benefit that you'd see from this whole collaboration process we're talking about?
Oh, definitely. Very good question. We spend a lot of time thinking through the client portal, the client engagement. Client is a vital piece of this. This is all being done to make it better for them. So, making sure that they see the timeline, they know exactly where they are on the journey. They also see what the project load, activity load, task load looks like, who's working on what. So, oh, so you're working on this and you're working on that. Can I help you? Can I actually have a question about what you've been building for me? Can I engage? So letting them see, letting them in, giving them insight into what the team has been doing for them is really valuable. So we made sure that they get to see the activity stream on the client portal because it also, in addition to kind of giving you a piece of comfort, yes, I'm not an expert, but I could see that you guys are doing, moving me forward. So thank you. But I have a question. So it opens up the dialogue and gets them into the game. It also gives a degree of appreciation that I think this team, onboarding teams need. What have you done for me? I don't see anything because I don't have any insight into what's being done for me. So it gives a lot of appreciation for what's being done, further, helping to improve the relationship. And it allows them to, hey, client, I need you to answer this question. I need you to do this and that and the other thing allows the client to engage in the process themselves on their time, weekends or nights or wherever they're able to move the process along. So it makes them empowered in their own process of onboarding.
Yeah. Now, if yeah, I know you said that most of who you sell to is our technology service providers. What if I'm a client, like an end customer, and I've hired a technology service provider and I want to use your tool? Do you ever have end customers that come to you and say, "We want to use this tool as part of our process, and we're going to ask our technology provider to collaborate with us using our tool"? Does that ever happen, or is that an option for customers that might be listening?
It's a good question, and we're seeing this question being raised again and again. In that they want customers who are being onboarded, who are going through this process for a year and a half, they want to have these things, they want to have the visibility. And so, yeah, interestingly enough, customers themselves who are going through the digital transformation are becoming a source of sales kind of avenue for us to introduce their service providers into new and better ways of doing things. So
Hmm.
definitely this question has come up again and again, and I think we'll hear it more as again our customers are driving. They're the ones who are going through the digital transformation, and they want to make sure they have stake in that experience.
Right. Yeah, for sure. So your company is Setuply. Where can we learn more about Setuply?
So you can check out our website, Setuply. It's like set up easily, enjoyably, frequently .com. You can also visit our LinkedIn page where we have a lot of content relevant to becoming more aware. It's not all about technology, it's about changing the mindset. Technology comes in as a sidekick.
Right. And you also have an upcoming conference coming up. Can you tell us about that too?
Oh, we're so excited about that. So it's called Onboarding World. It will be held in Boston, October 2nd through 4th. And it's everything you ever wanted to learn about onboarding. We're going to have industry experts, folks, people. We're going to have face-offs, contests, everything that you ever wanted to know about client onboarding. So if you're thinking about upskilling the teams, that's a place to be. If you want to share your expertise, we still might have some space on the panels to discuss various controversial topics, such as personalization versus scale in client onboarding, a very important topic. Where do you draw the line? How can technology stretch that line for you? And so on. And we have a bunch of really exciting events planned outside of the actual conference rooms in the evenings and so on. So definitely, if you find yourself thinking what to do, what's the onboarding, what's the vision for the coming year, what can we do to upskill the team, it's a place to go to. Onboarding World.
Onboarding World. And the website is Setuply, SETUPLY.com. So thanks for that. And that event sounds great as well. And really appreciate you being here today, Rachel. This is a great conversation, and appreciate you sharing all your insights and really shining a light on this sort of hidden part of digital transformation, business transformation, large change projects. There's a lot. There's a you're shining a light on a very important need in the market. So I appreciate you being here to talk about this topic with us here today.
It's my pleasure. It's great to be here. Thanks, Eric.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to the audience for joining here today. As I mentioned before, this was recorded live, and we're going to take this recording, we'll edit it, add some more content to it. It becomes part of our Transformation Ground Control podcast. You can go to transformationgroundcontrol.com to see past episodes of that show. And you can also subscribe on whichever platform you prefer. We stream it and drop it and distribute it to a ton of different platforms, but you can just find it all consolidated at that one site at transformationgroundcontrol.com. And this episode will come out in 2 to 3 weeks featuring this interview. So thank you for being here today, everyone. Hope you all have a great week, and we will see you next time, and have a great weekend as well. And